that she shall be clean. On the 8th day she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons and bring them to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest shall offer one for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. And the priest shall make atonement on her behalf before the Lord for her unclean discharge.
Now think about the passage from Luke that we read, verse 43. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years, and though she had spent all that she had on physicians, no one could cure her. This woman that reached out in Luke's gospel and touches Jesus was considered an unclean, untouchable. She was to be cast out from the community. She was not to be around others, because to be around others, to come into contact with someone else, made them ritually unclean as well, and therefore they would not be able to enter the temple. If you notice in Luke's gospel, when the woman enters the crowd, no one objects. After she reaches out and touches Jesus, no one really objects. No one calls out that she's unclean and should not be doing this. She would have been considered under the Levitical Holiness Code, which is the reading that we heard from Mickey, were the rules that kept the Jewish society in order and kept people in their places. This woman remained unclean for her whole life because she was constantly hemorrhaging. By entering the pressing crowd, the woman violated the social and the religious code of her day. The multitudes, through this contact, had become unclean as well, even though they may not have known it. For such an offense, the woman could have suffered death by stoning. Instead, she receives healing and the name of daughter, suggesting her inclusion into the family of Jesus instead of isolation, scorn, and death. The woman receives new life. Caste and gender in the ancient world was quite different than today's standards. Caste refers to the clear divisions of class that exist within a society. In the ancient world, most caste systems were closed. You could not advance to a higher class. If you were born in one class, you were in that class for the rest of your life. But Jesus changed all that. Jesus brought women who were in the bottom 3 of the levels of the caste system up out of that caste system and made them equal to him. What do you think the consequences of the stated or the implied consequences for the healing of the woman in Luke? How do you think that changed her outlook on life and her position in society?
Well, the thing of it is she was desperate to be healed. That's all was in her mind. Just like people with cancer would go to Mexico and eat dried weeds to get their cancer cured. So I don't think she thought beyond that.
Right. When it said she had exhausted all of her options with the physicians, and none of them had cured her. So yeah, she was at her wit's end.
I do think she had faith, because in Mark and Luke both, Jesus said, "Daughter, your faith has made you well." So she had to have the faith to do what was so unthought of for a woman to do at that time.
Yeah, she had to have faith and have some guts to be able to break the social norm of that day and to, enter the crowd and risk touching someone, especially a teacher, a rabbi, as Jesus was considered. She would definitely have been stoned and killed. The author says that the social and the religious implications of this miracle seem incredible for its time. Through the healing of this woman, Jesus destroyed the caste system and threw into question the standard gender bias. From Jesus' perspective, this woman was no different than any other disciple. She had shifted from the outer circle of society to the inner circle of Jesus. And Jesus did not require her, if you remember back to the Levitical Holiness Code, what would happen once you were cured, you had to go and offer up a pigeon or a dove. Jesus did not require her to do that. He said, "Daughter, go, your faith has made you well." Luke doesn't report that Jesus or anybody else held this woman accountable for breaking the social norm, which is odd. There's a poem that I love that I think sums up this miracle well and what Jesus did of bringing this woman who is an outcast that should not have been in this group of people, what he did. It's a poem by Edward Markham. The poem says, "He drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in." That's one of my most favorite poems. And I think that's what Jesus does. Jesus looks at us as humans and we make all of these rules about you belong. You don't look like me. You can't be here. And Jesus says, no, that's not what it's about. It's about love and equality. And he makes the circle wider and wider, including more and more people. This miracle narrative introduces the idea that sick and whole persons can dwell together. Women and men share equally in the kingdom's gift, and caste systems seem unnecessary in the world. The author asks, how often does the world respond to Luke's vision for the world with the words, "No, the sick are of lesser value than the well"? Women should be considered inferior to men. And God places class divisions between persons to make the poor strive harder and the rich share more. In short, the author says, let's just leave the cultural class and gender roles as they are. Let God work within our system. Maybe the radical miracle found in Luke rests with Jesus' repudiation of this poor thinking and human control and human-centered arrogance. God does not come to heal this. God comes to heal the system, not work within it. The second key is social memory and how women promote this social memory in miracles. Reminding us that God does not work within the social parameters constructed by humans may be a primary role of miracles. This role has been played by numerous Christian women throughout history. Hildegard, Joan of Arc, Julian of Norwich, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Susanna Wesley, and many modern people who find strength in the life stories of these women, challenge the injustices of our time. From that initial disruption, justice springs forth, rolling down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream, as the prophet Amos says in 5:24. And we are caught in its tide and swept along with it. Let's now look at the healing of the widow's son in Luke 7:11 through 17.
Soon afterwards he went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd went with him. As he approached the gate of the town, and a man who had died and was being carried out. He was his mother's only son, and she was a widow. And with her was a large crowd from the town. When the Lord saw her, he had a compassion for her and said to her, "Do not weep." Then he came forward and touched the bier, and the bearer stood still. He said, "Young man, I say to you, rise." The dead man sat upon and began to speak. And Jesus gave him to his mother. Fear seized all of them, and they glorified God, saying, "A great prophet has risen among us, and God has looked favorably on his people." This word about him spread throughout Judea and all the surrounding country.
1 Kings 17 through 24.
After this, the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, became ill. His illness was so severe that there was no breath left in him. She then said to Elijah, "What have you against me, O man of God? You have come to me to bring my sin to remembrance and to cause the death of my son." But he said to her, "Give me your son." He took him from her bosom, carried him up into the upper chamber where he was lodging, and laid him on his own bed. And he cried out to the Lord, "O Lord my God, you have brought calamity, even upon the widow with whom I am staying, by killing her son." Then he stretched himself upon the child 3 times and cried out to the Lord, "O Lord my God, let this child's life come into him again." The Lord listened to the voice of Elijah. The life of the child came into him again, and he revived. Elijah took the child, brought him down from the upper chamber into the house, and gave him to his mother. Then Elijah said, "See, your son is alive." So the woman said to Elijah, "Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord in your mouth is truth."
These events are very similar, and I think Luke uses this social memory of the collective culture to remind the people of in what Jesus did in the healing of the widow's son, of what Elijah did in 1 Kings. The deceased man in both stories was the only son of a widowed mother. And if we remember back, women were considered property. A single woman she had no rights. She couldn't own property. She was living in a home and her son died or her husband died, and she had no male relative that would come to her rescue. She was kicked out and would often be homeless. So obviously, the healing of this son was of great importance to this widow. Luke preserves the elements of this healing story that he includes in his other healing stories. Jesus' compassion, his attention to those who are the most marginal or the most vulnerable in their society. Jesus' total disregard for the conventions of the religious purity codes. That this man was the son of a widow would call to mind the miraculous healing by Elijah in 1 Kings, which we mentioned before. Luke reports that Jesus, quote, gave him to his mother. Those are precisely the words that are used in 1 Kings, referring to Elijah. Jesus had healed before by simply stating that the ill person would be healed. In other instances, he touched the diseased or the troubled person to heal them. In this instance, Jesus placed his hand on the funeral bier and before commanding the man to rise. If you know about the Jewish custom, a dead body was unclean. You couldn't touch it. They had special funeral attendants that would attend the bodies and prepare them for burial so that they would not defile or make others unclean. So by his act of simply touching that funeral bier, the